This is the World Organic News Podcast for the week ending 16th of May 2016. John Moore reporting. Little housekeeping first. The World Organic News Weekly Podcast is now on iTunes and Podbean. So if you found us that way, thank you and welcome. If you like this podcast, I'd ask you to leave a review at either or both of those sites, as this really helps others find the podcast. If you've already done that, thank you. If you're going to do that, thank you too. Now to the reason we're all here. This week we begin with regenerating land from the blog Regenerative Developments. Mark Shepard's farm in Viola, Wisconsin is a great example of the processes at work. Based on the permaculture idea of regenerating landscapes, this farm shows a cold, temperate climate way of doing things. The importance of regenerative agriculture cannot be overemphasised. Look, really look next time you're out and about. The slippage of topsoils, the erosion gullies, the monoculture production, the biohazard suits on farm workers, and the unseen suffering of confined animals are all destroying both the means of agricultural production and its consumers. Unlike other industries, food production is the one thing we can't do without. 3 times a day, 2 or even 1 in some parts of the world, the soil, the sun and the weather keeps us from returning our nutrients to the soil. We need to eat to live. The destruction of our topsoils has been a slow-burning deal with the devil. In return for nitrogen in artificial form, we have given up 1 to 2% of our topsoils every year. At first this was unnoticed. It becomes glaringly obvious after 70 years of post-World War II industrial chemical farming. Regenerative agriculture in the form of permaculture, sloping agricultural land technology, biodynamics, or natural farming from Masanobu Fukuoka is essential to the feeding of the world. All these philosophies and methodologies will be explored in this podcast after we finish with my founding author, John Seymour, and his complete book of self-sufficiency. At present, we already produce more than enough food to feed every mouth on the planet. What leads to hunger is corruption, poor transport systems, food growing nowhere near its consumers, and the unintended consequences of Adam Smith's unseen hand of the market. That's market with a capital M. Shortening supply lines, growing food where it is to be consumed has its drawbacks, famine being the most obvious. If a late frost or prolonged drought destroys food crops in a locale, people starve. That's why transport and information flow is critical. We now live in such a world. Not only can we transport emergency food to where it's needed, small-scale hydroponic and aquaponic systems can be deployed in such areas. Regenerative agriculture also softens the effect of drought, frost and other climatic vagaries. It builds resilience into food production systems, and it works. And it works from the balcony of a flat to the rangelands and steppes of continents. We must adapt these changes if we are to provide food not laced with known carcinogens or even probable carcinogens. I'm looking at you, biotech industries. More on that later in the show. We must, to misquote a phrase from the 20th century, seize back the means of food production. This is the greatest political act we can make in a world obsessed with fashion, style and vacuous celebrity. Hands in soil, feet upon the earth, we must take a stand against the pointlessness of corporate-driven, profit-fueled oligarchy of multinational control, whose point is profit rather than equality and dignity. Growing our own food is the way forward. In the same way as ivy overcoming a building, each seed we plant is a step towards a better, happier, healthier world. A link to this post is in the show notes. And now, completely aware of the irony in this statement, a word from our sponsor. This episode of the World Organic News Weekly Podcast is brought to you by Gem Biscuits. Gem Biscuits make gluten-free, sorghum flour-based biscuits and cookies. Choc chip, hazelnut choc chip, coffee hazelnut choc chip, and the original spicy tea biscuit. All these are handmade with, of course, organic ingredients. These biscuits are great. Please check out the website, gembiscuits.com. That's GEM biscuits.com. A link is in the show notes. And now, rounding up celiac disease. Is GMO to blame? This is the title of a post from the blog Gone with the Wheat. Gives an interesting take on the glyphosate versus gluten debate. Celiac disease is a nasty condition, and our sponsor caters for that market segment. The point of this article, and where I'm going with it, is at the epidemiological level, not the individual. There are two possible explanations for the rise in gluten intolerance over the recent past. One, a new gene expression in a population which has consumed wheat, rye and barley for at least 10,000 years. Or two, a change in the production methods in the recent past. In the blog, the author Gluten-Free Lady digs into the way wheat is grown. Changes in starch content have occurred to better suit the flour to modern bread-making technologies, but the salient charge has been immediately pre-harvest, particularly in the US. Running a header, or combine harvester if you prefer, through still alive but mature wheat puts a certain strain on the machine. Running a header through dead plants, much less so. To facilitate the latter practice, most non-organic wheat is now sprayed with glyphosate a few days before harvest. That's right, food is being sprayed with weed killer just prior to harvest to save wear and tear on machinery. It is worth adding here that the World Health Organization classified glyphosate as a probable carcinogen last year. Without going into it too deeply, probable carcinogen is one level below known carcinogen. Evidence points towards the connection and further research is ongoing. Now, farmers were told, as we all were by the manufacturer of Roundup, Monsanto, that the product was perfectly safe for humans. This is the same company who told us Agent Orange was safe for humans too. But the World Health Organization classification changes things. In summary, wheat is being doused in a probable carcinogen to save wear and tear on machinery, at the same time as an increase in allergenic reactions to a food at least 10,000 years old. Coincidence? Possibly, but until peer-reviewed research is carried out on the effects of glyphosate in the pre-harvest routines of wheat production, we won't know, and it is in the not knowing that the greatest danger lies. What can we do? Buy organic if we can, avoid commercially produced non-sourdough breads, and write letters to politicians. Flood them with demands for banning a probable carcinogen and research into its effect upon people and the environment. Be the change. This week's walk through the complete book of self-sufficiency by John Seymour will be postponed until next week for time reasons. Any suggestions, feedback or criticisms of the podcast or blog are most welcome. Email me at podcast@worldorganicnews.com. A transcript of each episode is available at the blog www.worldorganicnews.com under the tab Podcasts. Thank you for listening. I'll be back in a week.